Hello, and welcome to Life Diaries, a space where the pages of life open up, one story at a time. These are tales written by experience, spoken from the heart. Take a moment for yourself, and let's begin. Sarah was a woman of her time, confident, perceptive, self-sufficient. For almost all her conscious life, she saw herself this way, and the world around her seemed to confirm the correctness of her self-assessment. She approached marriage with cold calculation. She envisioned a strong family where children would appear in the future, perhaps one or even two, born of a man whom she sincerely loved, deeply respected, and whose affection for her was equally strong. Their married life with David lasted 5 years. During this time, of course, a lot happened. Step by step, with varying success in understanding each other and not without losses, they passed through those very notorious crises of married life. They learned to smooth over rough edges, mastered shared household chores, and divided both joys and sorrows in half. The first test came when tender impulses of the soul gave way to the mundane necessity of preparing dinner daily, consisting of meatballs and mashed potatoes, with Sarah expected to shape and fry these very meatballs, and David to consume them with an expression of genuine bliss. In the kitchen, Sally was initially clumsy, mastering the basics of cooking only after the wedding, and given this, the one sitting at the table sometimes required even more resilience and courage than the one standing at the stove. The trembling anticipation of being able to touch a beloved body was replaced by the awareness of the constant presence of an equally demanding one nearby. And the impatient desire to see each other after even a short separation gave way to the firm knowledge that meeting was inevitable, regardless of the momentary desire. In other words, the romantic charm of the candy bouquet period, as predicted, dissipated, giving way to the harsh prose of everyday life. They managed to overcome this crisis, especially since Sally's meatballs gradually acquired a much more pleasant taste. They successfully agreed on time for watching TV series and movies together, and for greater comfort during nighttime hours, considering each other's sleeping habits, a spacious double bed appeared in the bedroom. It was harder to find common ground regarding the regularity of their daily meetings. Here, the situation was quite peculiar. For a time, Sarah worked as an operator at a 24-hour gas station and was periodically away from home for whole days, which provided plenty of fodder for jokes among their mutual acquaintances and friends. David, smiling understandingly, would always reply, "Well, how else? Why do Sarah and I have such harmony? Because we live 1 day on, 3 days off. So, we just don't have time to get tired of each other." Sarah listened to these witticisms with a strained smile. Then came another crisis, predicted by more experienced spouses, and, more importantly, confirmed by official psychological science: the 3-year crisis of married life. This one was much more serious. Having become so accustomed to each other that they stopped paying attention to appearance, they were rapidly sliding towards the abyss of mutual indifference. Sarah, remembering her plans to live with David at least until their golden anniversary, resolutely set about saving the situation. Unexpectedly for everyone, she cut her vacation short by 2 weeks. On the very first day, David, with a martyr's air, went up on deck and suddenly saw a dazzling blonde with lush curves and long legs, one of which, that is, the leg, peeked out effectively from a slit dress up to mid-thigh. At the same time, as written in Sally's romance novels, a light breeze played in her hair, where the sun's rays were entangled. From the suddenness, David choked on the beer he was drinking at that moment, and in the next second, he almost drowned, realizing that the stunning beauty seemed painfully familiar and was smiling only at him. Sucking in his stomach, which, frankly, had been causing him quite a bit of grief lately, David looked around uncertainly and smiled back. The blonde took off her sunglasses, and before him was his lawful wife. In short, the marriage was saved. For another couple of years, Sarah was happy next to David. Everyday life was not burdensome. David was a simple, ordinary man. He was not like a romantic hero, living intensely for his beloved and dreaming only of one thing: to die with her name on his lips. He simply wanted to quietly share life with this chosen one. He was an ordinary man, loving hearty and tasty food, not too concerned about his growing sides, adoring lounging on the sofa in the company of the TV remote, and listening to his wife's opinion. But then something broke. A crack, barely noticeable at first, gradually widened, turning into an abyss into which all her hopes and plans collapsed. Who knows what caused it? Outwardly, everything remained the same. They, as always, returned home, ate, drank, changed clothes, and slept. In the morning, they got up, left, and upon returning, ate and slept again. And so, day after day. Sarah reread mountains of books on family psychology. Specialists unanimously spoke of the vital importance of maintaining emotional contact. But to maintain something, you need to have that something. Perhaps this very contact with David never existed. Frankly, she couldn't recall her heart happily skipping a beat at the thought of him. And David never blushed with happiness, handing her a perfunctory bouquet for her birthday or Mother's Day. Although, it must be admitted, their first meeting occurred under rather curious circumstances, which, with some stretch, could even be called romantic. They met at a City Day celebration. Sarah had been living in this city for 3 years, and a significant part of that time she had devoted to mastering the art of walking in high heels. Having been born and lived in a village until she was 20, Sally had absolutely no skill in this. Moreover, having spent her entire childhood and youth running around in sneakers and flip-flops, no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't confidently walk in heels even half the height of her ultimate goal for a long time. She had to learn this at all costs. In her eyes, the ability to walk in high heels was as much a sign of civilization as the habit of brushing her teeth, drinking bitter coffee with an expression of bliss on her face, and confidently tapping her fingers on a computer keyboard. Finally, after many months of titanic effort, she felt ready to conquer the world. That festive evening, she triumphantly strode through the city streets in wonderful suede shoes on dizzyingly high heels. Sarah felt significantly taller, slimmer, more beautiful, and most importantly, about 300% more city-like than usual. "Sally, it's late. We're heading home," said her friends, who, by the way, were prudently wearing sneakers. Frankly, Sarah's feet ached mercilessly. Her right heel was starting to rub raw, but she decided to crown her triumph by attending the fireworks on the embankment. "Well, go ahead. I'll walk around some more," the beauty said resolutely, trying to make her voice sound confident. And she walked until she couldn't anymore. Finally, hobbling on legs trembling with fatigue and also rubbed raw, a heel treacherously twisted with a terrible crunch, as if nothing less than a major bone had broken, and Sally, feeling a sharp pain in her ankle, collapsed onto the nearest bench. Her leg hurt mercilessly and seemed to be swelling. Her phone, intended to capture the stunning beauty against the backdrop of cityscapes, had long since died and turned off. Sally looked around helplessly. "Excuse me, can I help you?" a quiet, delicate male voice asked. "Can you? You absolutely must!" Sally almost exclaimed and, involuntarily groaning, clutched her ankle. A few steps away from her, in the evening twilight, stood a man. "There's an emergency room not far from here, just around the corner," he continued. "You should go there." "And what about him?" Sarah asked cautiously, her imagination already painting a highly romantic and appealing picture. Here the man literally bursts into the doctor's office, gently carrying the fair-haired diva in his arms. Damn, I knew I should have curled my hair. Here he is, caring, carefully lowering her onto the couch and sitting next to her with worry on his face, and then carrying her out of the doctor's office in his arms just the same way, and everyone sitting in the corridor smiling happily and admiringly. And suddenly, his voice intruded upon these incredibly vivid pictures. The man, as if having read her thoughts, said, "Excuse me, my dear girl. I would be delighted to carry you to the emergency room and back to wherever you need to go, but I simply cannot lift you," the man mumbled sheepishly. Sarah stared at him in astonishment, then distractedly at herself, or rather, at what fell within her field of vision, then back at the man, as if estimating her size against his arms, and burst out laughing. The man, who introduced himself as David, still offered his help. However, not as a carrier, but rather as a support. He skillfully and quite tightly bandaged her ankle, helped her hobble to the emergency room. And when she came out of the doctor's office, limping, she was surprised to find her recent rescuer sitting on a chair by the door. "How are you, Sally?" he asked timidly. "I'm fine, I'll live," she promised optimistically. "Sally, how about we live together?" David suddenly blurted out and blushed painfully. "Well, not right away, of course. Not now, but maybe someday you'll agree." And so it happened that they met, liked each other, and tied their destinies together. David was a native city dweller, initially had a not very profitable but reliable profession as a construction engineer, a not very large but comfortable apartment, and represented a quite attractive option for starting a family. David was not stunning in appearance. He didn't have bottomless eyes of a rare, interesting color, or curly dark hair falling on a high forehead. Although his forehead was indeed high, of an antique cast. On the contrary, despite having just passed his 30th birthday, early bald spots were already gleaming on his head, and his t-shirt treacherously outlined a slightly protruding belly. "But we've never had curly hair in our family," he would laugh, patting his belly expressively. He had ordinary brown eyes, a snub nose, and a habit of squinting due to already failing eyesight. Sarah, who came to conquer the big city from a tiny village, quite soberly assessed her abilities and opportunities. A high school diploma, a year working as a secretary in the village council, and 3 years of institute studying accounting, which she dropped out of a couple of months ago. This was too little to claim anything significant, even considering her long legs and pretty face. And the upbringing given to the orphan Sally by her grandmother, completely old-fashioned, burdened with a heap of rules, restrictions, moral barriers, would never have allowed her to use those very legs and face for selfish purposes, much to her regret. Therefore, Sarah huddled on precarious terms in a student dormitory, worked as a salesperson in a 24-hour store, and painfully pondered whether she could glue the hole in her winter boot. Therefore, upon hearing, "Sally, I love you. Marry me," she barely hesitated. And now, after 5 years of this very life, it suddenly became crystal clear to her. The person next to her is not the right one at all, and she is unbearably bored. David was caring, considerate, agreed with her on almost everything. Sometimes it seemed his main concern was whether she had worn warm tights under her jeans. "Dave, you're just like my grandmother, honestly," Sarah would joke about her husband's excessive care. "I feel like I married a nanny. Where's the passion, the frenzy, the jealousy?" "Sally, well, you knew you weren't marrying Casanova," David laughed. "As for passion, I passionately want you not to freeze while standing at the bus stop. That's all my passion." "You know, I don't even understand what's wrong with me," she confided to her only close friend, Lisa. "I'm bored, you understand? Even during intimate moments, I feel like he's tucking a blanket around me on the fly." "Are you out of your mind? He can't get enough of you and you're being difficult." Lisa snorted. I don't want to be breathed on. Or rather, I do, but not like that, Sally said angrily. Well, well, be careful you don't mess things up, Lisa snorted. Soon, she met a man who was the complete opposite of David. Steve was decisive, impulsive, assertive. That same evening, he suggested she come to his place. She, not thinking clearly, with her heart pounding loudly, agreed, and trembling with excitement, entered the stranger's apartment. Steve immediately lunged at her in the hallway. She broke free and, with the continued ringing in her ears, ran down the stairs. There it is, passion, Sarah decided and demonstratively left her phone with Steve's calls visible. Sally, please answer, David asked after the phone lit up with an incoming call for the 5th time in a row. And aren't you interested in who it is? Sarah asked provocatively. Well, I assume if it concerns me, you'll tell me. David shrugged. Well, I don't know, Sarah replied in a rather unpleasant voice. In short, everything became clear. She no longer wanted to live with David. So, divorce and her maiden name. What awaited her if she was left alone? In a couple of years, she would turn 30, no children. She herself had given up everything lively, bright, interesting, the kind of life she had always dreamed of, 5 years ago. True, the apartment remained, the very one they lived in with David. And knowing Dave, one could assume he would leave the apartment to her. But walls, floor, and ceiling would not save her from loneliness, from the oppressive feeling that everything was already lost, that she was late everywhere. What to do next, Sarah truly didn't know, but she knew with absolute certainty what she would never do if a catastrophe did strike her life, and she and David decided to separate. She wouldn't sit on the windowsill, sadly watching raindrops crawl down the glass, and feel her cheeks become as wet as the window outside. And she wouldn't cry at the sight of their joint wedding photo, where they were so young, beautiful, laughing, holding hands, as if ready to jump and fly together to heavenly paradise. And she certainly wouldn't start sorting through his shirts, remembering that he wore this white one at the last birthday, and this one, in a thin pink and blue stripe, was especially attractive on their last anniversary, when she felt like the happiest wife and intended to live a whole life with this man. And it would be utterly unworthy of respect if she suddenly started checking her phone's call history every half hour to remember when he last called, knowing perfectly well that that very call was unforgivably, criminally long ago. No, she would be completely different. No one could imagine her as an abandoned wife. She would be strong and proud. She wouldn't stoop to scandals, quarrels, and mutual accusations. She would simply express regret, easily and gracefully admitting her possible shortcomings, and wish him, David, a happy future life. Then she would close the door behind him and sigh, perhaps heavily, but freely. And in general, she would finally do the renovation they had been putting off their entire married life. Oh yes, she mustn't forget to stop using the words we, our, joint, and other remnants. So, she would renovate the apartment, and then her wardrobe, and buy that white suit she saw 6 months ago in a store, which her husband had categorically objected to at the time, simply because she liked it, and it suited her very well, paying no attention to its price or impracticality. Then she, free and proud, would move on. And everyone around would smile at the sight of her and whisper softly to each other, "That's Sarah. How beautiful she is, despite everything. What dignity. What courage in the face of adversity and injustice. And he, well, he's just an idiot for letting such a treasure slip away." All this so captivated her rich imagination that she replayed the scenes of separation and everything that would follow in her head many times, and she played herself into it. It's no coincidence they say, "Be careful what you wish for." The very thing she had imagined so many times happened. David said he was leaving and filing for divorce. "Sally, this can't go on. I see that you... In short, it's better for us to separate. It will be better for both of us. I decided to do this so you would be free," he squeezed out during their last conversation. "Are you in love with another woman?" she asked, instantly slipping into the role of victim. "Of course. You've had someone else for ages, and you don't have the courage to admit it. I knew you'd leave me." David sighed heavily and said, "No, I don't have anyone and can't have anyone. And I don't want to leave you. However, if it makes it easier for you, you can blame me for anything you want." He somehow tiredly ran a hand over his face, as if trying to wipe something unpleasant, sticky, from it. Then he looked at her strangely, flinched, as if remembering something and deciding to say it, but remained silent and left. And here she is, after all, sitting on the damn windowsill, on which she doesn't remember how she got there, and weeping. So much so that because of the tears, she can't even see those very raindrops that, as if in mockery of her, are drumming on the glass. Dave's shirts, which hang peacefully in the closet, she has already sorted through and even pressed one of them to her face. Though it's not quite clear why, because there was no scent of the person she had loved until recently left after washing. But they were Dave's shirts, and the fact that they continued to hang in the closet as if nothing had happened, while he would never be there again, made her unbearably sad. The wedding photograph, the very one David once jokingly called a leap into the unknown, had also been taken off the nail several times. Resolving to remove the frame, she suddenly had the strong feeling that a hole had formed in the wall because of it. The same kind of hole as in her own life. She lacked the strength or courage to look into that emptiness yet. Let it hang, after all, it's just a photograph. Sarah tried to show courage and heroism, looking at the face of the happy groom and feeling the sobs rising to her throat again. As for the phone, here she managed to live up to her resolutions. She didn't look at the call history. Instead, she stared at his number and the attached photo for hours. Catching herself in this self-deception, she angrily turned off the phone, only to involuntarily turn it back on a few minutes later. Amazing! Despite her grand plans for physical and emotional liberation, she doesn't want to throw away the furniture bought with David, or even the rather ridiculous, in her opinion, wallpaper imitating peeled and chipped boards, which for some reason he terribly liked. She no longer wanted to tear up that white suit. But if she thought about it, what did she need it for? Firstly, she would have to wash it every other day. And secondly, Dave was right when he said that in white, she looked twice as wide as she actually was. Hold on, is she regretting the breakup? No, it can't be. No, of course not. It's just a silly woman's fear of loneliness, nothing more. And David? Well, David finally did something manly, perhaps for the first time since the day they met, when he pretended to be a porter for her. She needed to stop thinking about it, stop feeling sorry for herself. She needed to act as she had imagined many times, become proud and calm. And she needed to change the surroundings so she wouldn't walk around and stumble upon the wreckage of her past life every minute. Exactly. She needed to go on vacation, finally arrange a luxurious life for herself, distract herself, relax, and then think about what to do next. A few days later, she was lying on the seashore, feeling the gentle breeze on her skin and squinting at the soft rays of the setting sun. "Sarah, oh my God, is that really you? You?" Amazement and joy sounded in the tall woman's voice. A large, full woman in a colorful sarong that made her look even more massive was staring intently at Sally. Bleached wet hair stuck out in all directions, and a colorful paper strip sat on her nose, meant to protect the most prominent part of her body from getting burned. However, even without all this beach paraphernalia, Sally would hardly have recognized Anne, her old school friend, right away. They hadn't seen each other since they finished school. "Don't you recognize me?" the woman exclaimed. "I do, but with great difficulty. What happened to you, Annie?" Sarah wanted to say, but of course said something else aloud. "Oh, well, I'll be. Unbelievable. Anne, of course I recognized you right away. Well, you haven't changed at all." "You're lying, of course," Anne stated habitually. Arguing with this statement was foolish. When Anne left home, she was maybe not a reed, but still a slender creature with appetizing curves and dark blonde curls. Only her voice and the habit of tucking a strand of hair behind her ear remained of the former girl. "Well, Sarah, you don't have to try for me," Anne laughed. "I know everything about myself. Just 50 extra kilos and centimeters." She waved a hand. "But you, I must admit, look simply stunning. So slim, it's amazing. Well done." Anne looked over her former friend with sincere approval. Sarah smiled involuntarily. After all, it wasn't for nothing that she and David had been persistently getting in shape for the past year and had even announced a competition. Who could lose more extra pounds in 6 months? The prize was announced as serious. The winner could choose the location of their next vacation. Dave was even in the lead for a time, having lost his famous sides and gaining biceps, and happily promised his wife that she would spend a month relaxing sitting next to him on the riverbank with a fishing rod in her hands. Sally was not at all attracted to such a pastime, and she pushed harder, leaving Dave with his pathetic 5 lost kilograms far behind. Suddenly returning her thoughts to her husband, she angrily shook her head, smiled at Anne. "Listen, Anne, let's go somewhere and talk, okay? We haven't seen each other in so many years." "Of course, with pleasure. I'll just warn mine and we'll go." Anne nodded. "Oh yes," Anne sighed. "Unlike you, I'm here with a backpack and trailers." She chuckled, but it didn't sound very cheerful. "In short, with my husband and kids. I already have 2. Can you imagine? 2. "Oh, Anne, you're amazing. I'm so happy for you." Sally grabbed her friend's hand and shook it. "Nothing to be happy about," Anne waved her hand. "It's not a vacation with 2 young boys, plus a third one. He's been grown up for a long time, but sometimes he behaves worse than the kids." "Are you talking about your husband?" Sally laughed. "Yep, about him, the dear father of our family." Apparently, Anne had a chance to vent. In other words, she couldn't stop. "Although, if it weren't for my persistence and ingenuity, I wouldn't have kids now, not a chance." Anne finally relaxed and even laughed at her own joke. "He kept persuading me to wait, save up, get settled, not rush. Well, in short, like all men." "And what about you? Are you married? Kids?" "Yes, I'm married." Sally nodded, for some reason deciding not to tell Anne about the upcoming changes in her life. "Well, we haven't had kids yet. I'm falling behind you, Annie." "Oh, well, it's not a difficult thing," the other woman snorted. "Anyway, Sally, I have to run. Don't go anywhere, okay? I'll be quick." Anne rushed to the other end of the beach with all the speed available to her large size. And Sarah started thinking. "Listen, Dave, what do you dream about?" She seemed to hear her own voice. "Well, what about, Sally? I want a son, or even better, a daughter. Or maybe a son first, and then a daughter? Or even better, both at once." "Dave, but we've talked about this 100 times. What kids now? I need to get my diploma, get a job, otherwise I'll be stuck as a former village girl. And anyway, what's the hurry? We have our whole lives ahead of us," she replied to her husband. "So what? What does that matter? Give me a child, children." This conversation arose between them periodically, but Sally, feeling that she was stealing something from David and from herself, didn't like the topic and ended it with a guilty look. No, of course, she wanted children, maybe no less than David, but not now, later, much later. And anyway, from David? After such thoughts, she was horrified by her depravity, scared, and forbade herself from discussing the topic. "Well, I'm ready." Anne managed to change. Although the beach outfit, as it turned out, suited her much more than the clearly tight sundress on the woman's large figure. The fabric was stretched tightly, outlining contours that were not very pleasant to the eye. "What, fat?" she chuckled. "Well, what can you do? Not everyone can be models like some people." She once again looked Sarah up and down with admiration. "Well, shall we go?" They found a spot in a small cafe on the embankment and immersed themselves first in memories of youth, and then in the story of the past few years. Anne did most of the talking. As it turned out, she got married almost immediately after settling in the city and had 2 sons. "We live with my husband in his district. I'm registered there and the kids are too, so we live no worse than others. But I still feel like I'm on precarious terms. After all, if something happens, who am I there? Nobody, and no name to call me by. And my mother-in-law is constantly nagging, and, as is proper, about her beloved son. She doesn't even hesitate. She says it right to my face that I'm a village hen who married her son. Hear that? As if I got pregnant just to marry him. No, of course, when we got married, I was already 5 months along. So what? Everyone does that. But she hasn't given me a moment's peace for 7 years, can you imagine? And I cook, you're still doing it wrong. It's impossible to eat. And I don't raise the kids right. And my house is a mess. And my husband is forgotten and neglected. And her beloved son sits there quiet as a mouse, as if that's how it should be. Well, in short, a classic story about a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. Wait, is your mother-in-law really bothering you? Sally asked again, not even immediately understanding the meaning of the question. No, I don't seem to have such problems. My relationship with Margaret Miller is quite normal, even good. Really? Anne drawled disbelievingly. How interesting. She doesn't call you a village sheep to your face and doesn't stick her nose in your pots? Well, congratulations! Anne, with a speed surprising for her size, darted up, noticing one of her offspring trying to climb onto the parapet. The family, namely both boys and Anne's husband dozing on a sun lounger, turned out to be located quite nearby. Left alone for a while, Sally mentally returned to the topic they had just touched upon. The relationship with her mother-in-law, David's mother, had been difficult. Of course, like any normal woman who loves her son and wants him to be happy, Margaret Miller was not thrilled with such a relative. Sally was the complete opposite of Margaret herself, and realized this immediately upon their first meeting. A beautiful woman who, despite her age, maintained her posture and the manner of holding her head high, with stylishly styled short gray hair and subtle makeup, immediately struck Sarah. She wore high-heeled shoes, a narrow skirt that Sarah herself would never have fit into even after a year of strict dieting, and a blouse with a satin bow in front. The future bride's heart sank somewhere into her heels. The woman spoke in absurdly correct sentences, articulating every word clearly, and looked strictly and intently. And, as if stitching each word together with a thread, she asked, "Well, my dear, it's all clear with you. What, I wonder, made you decide that you are worthy of my son?" She was saved from fainting by David putting his arm around her shoulders and whispering in her ear, managing to kiss her temple. "Sally, don't you die on me. My mother worked as a vice principal at a lyceum for many years, so it's a kind of professional deformation, you see. She's actually kind and cheerful." "Right, of course. She'll asphalt me now and immediately become kinder. That's why I feel like a failing student in the principal's office, Sally thought. Of course, what kind of daughter-in-law was she for this grand dame? She must have dreamed of a city girl from an educated family, with 2 diplomas, 3 foreign languages, and a dozen pairs of stiletto heels, as a wife for her David. And she was a village bumpkin in a silly skirt. What an idiot! Why did she decide that the brighter she dressed, the easier it would be to meet new people? Oh my God! I can see the table set in the living room. There are 10 pieces of cutlery by each plate, and she knows nothing but a fork, a spoon, and a knife, and that's a kitchen knife. Listen, I completely forgot, Margaret Miller said. We'll just sit with Sally for a bit. Of course! Panicked thoughts rushed in. They forgot the bread. And how can a village girl sit at the table without bread? She eats everything with bread and bites off half a loaf at once. This is the end of me. David left, and Sarah gloomily stared at a painting hanging on the wall. You seem to be afraid of me, a quiet female voice suddenly said. To be honest, I'm also a little afraid of all this. Maybe we can be a little afraid together, and then get rid of this feeling? Sarah looked at Margaret Miller in astonishment. Instead of a refined villain, a beautiful, smiling woman stood before her. Her features softened, and even her figure no longer resembled a perfectly upright mannequin. Perhaps I overdid the formality. Please forgive me. David says in such cases that the Minister of Education is peeking out of me. She laughed softly and touched Sally's hand. Sally, you must understand me. I just need time to get used to the changes in our lives. Do you understand? I understand. Sally nodded, not understanding anything at all. What did this magical transformation mean? Just a moment ago, there was a wary, suspicious, arrogant old woman, just as a mother-in-law should be according to all canons. And suddenly, instead of her, please receive a kind fairy godmother. It doesn't happen like that. You don't believe me? You don't believe me? Margaret Miller, having easily read Sarah's thoughts, sighed. I wouldn't have believed it myself. Just a few days ago, I'll tell you honestly, when David told me he proposed to you, I threw a terrible tantrum. I even told him he had to choose, either you or me. Can you imagine? She closed her eyes and winced painfully, as if reliving the terrible scene. Well, and David said that he loves me very much, that it hurts him that I say that, but he will choose you. That's how it is, Sally. My son loves you very much, and everything else doesn't matter. I don't want to lose him, so let's declare a truce and get used to each other, so to speak. Get to know each other better. All right? She winked at Sarah. Mom! David's voice came from the living room. Are you kidding me? Are you expecting an ambassador from a foreign power? Why did you lay out the family silver? I don't know what half of these knives and forks are for. Sally sighed gratefully, but so that no one noticed. That evening, of course, was not an ideal family dinner. Sarah couldn't fully relax because it was very difficult to believe what she had heard right away. David was heartily amused, poking at his plate with his fingers. Margaret, barely suppressing laughter, tried to frown. And Sally suddenly said, David, stop it! Behave yourself! After that, everyone laughed. Despite the encouraging results of meeting her future mother-in-law, life was not easy for Sarah. Margaret Miller was frankly shocked by Sarah's complete helplessness as a homemaker. Sally, please forgive me, but this won't do. David, unfortunately, has a rather sensitive stomach. He needs a diet and proper home-cooked food. I am, of course, ready to help, but still, you yourself. Sarah, confused by the woman's persistent refusal to address her informally, had to begin mastering the intricacies of soups and meatballs under her mother-in-law's guidance. Sarah proved to be a rather slow learner, and Margaret had to show a great deal of patience and endurance. It's quite surprising, Sally, her mother-in-law couldn't help but say. What village did you finish school in? Do you think girls in the village stand by Russian stoves with pothooks from the age of 5? I can't pickle cabbage or cook borscht or fry meat. Well, you'll have to learn, Margaret Miller chuckled. 6 months later, David said, Sally, dear, did Mom drop by? Her meatballs are still masterpieces. And he froze with a meatball raised on his fork. Noticing his wife's triumphant look, he hastily added, But yours are not bad either, of course. It was precisely thanks to Margaret Miller's somewhat ironic but sensitive and tactful guidance that she stopped dyeing white laundry a wonderful gray color when washing, burning innocent Dave's t-shirts with an iron, and most importantly, learned to dress in a way that she herself could finally appreciate the full power of her feminine charm. Sorry, Sally. Will you excuse me? It's like being on a volcano. They won't let you sit still. Anne, having taken the budding climber off the steep stairs and handed him over to her husband, flopped down at the table. What were we talking about? Oh, mothers-in-law. May they live well in this world and the next. Oh, well. And how's your health? Everything okay? Not sick with anything? Well, you look great. What kind of illnesses could you have? Oh, I have no healthy spot left, believe me. Anne, distracted from her friend, launched into a new story. It was clear that Anne was literally pouring her heart out, having the opportunity to talk. First it shoots here, then it stings there. The doctor says, Anne, my dear, as if I don't know I need to lose weight. And how can I lose weight when I'm swallowing handfuls of medicine, and then eating something to chase them down? And who will let me lie down properly? Last year I ended up having surgery, well, on our women's issue. And believe it or not, they almost burned the house down without me. They made such a mess in 10 days. When I got home, I didn't know where to start. And the main thing is, they barely crawl. Mom, do this. Mom, do that. My husband even remembered the word, dear. Hear that? She laughed. Dear, he says, I don't have a single clean sock left. Can you imagine? But when I was in the hospital, would anyone even visit? Bring an apple. Mom! A fair-haired boy about 7, obviously Annie's older son, tugged at his mother's sleeve and whined something under his breath with a pitiful look, shifting from foot to foot. Toilet. Go with your father. Oh my God, especially since you need the men's room, Anne said angrily. Will you let me sit in peace? Where's your father? Wait, I'll send them. Anne pulled her son aside. Sarah looked out at the endless expanse of the sea, and for some reason, new images from the past surfaced in her mind. She didn't get sick often, but each time David was so scared, as if she might die in terrible agony any moment. At the first signs of a cold, he would lock her at home, pile her with blankets, jars of fruit juice, fruits, and crosswords, and call every half hour asking about her temperature. After a few years of married life, David's psyche was subjected to a very serious test. Sally, dear, how could this happen? David was almost crying, and it was obvious that if it weren't for the doctors, he would have fallen to his knees beside her, and perhaps actually wept. His lips were trembling suspiciously, and he blinked frequently. How could this happen, Sally dear? Dave, stop it. What are you reading? Well, it happened. What can you do now? She looked at the doctor sheepishly. Dr. Smith, let's go. Your wife needs rest, healthy sleep, and proper nutrition. The fracture is serious, of course. I won't hide it. But everything will be fine, I'm sure. The operation was successful. The main thing is not to worry so much. The elderly doctor shook his head, obviously believing that the husband was suffering much more than the wife at the moment. David rushed around like a madman between work, home, and the hospital where Sarah was lying with a complex leg fracture after a bad fall from an icy staircase. Judging by David's deliveries, he believed she was starving, and that her main and only task now was endless consumption of fruits, steamed meatballs, yogurts, and sandwiches with caviar. "Well, Sally, your man is golden, of course," said her ward neighbors, who readily helped Sally consume Dave's food parcels. Imagine driving back and forth every day, calling 5 times, and even standing under the window for half an hour until you condescend to look out. Are you newlyweds or something? Newlyweds, my foot! Sally laughed. We've been together for 4 years already. After being discharged from the hospital, David simply devoted himself to Sarah and her recovering leg. He cooked food, did everything around the house, took her for walks, drove her to procedures, and when he wasn't busy with work, with endless worries, he simply sat next to her and held her hand. "Listen, Dave, have you bulked up from carrying me around?" she said once, habitually putting her arms around her husband's neck. "Well, what do you expect, Sally dear? I'm carrying my most precious treasure, not just anything," David grumbled then. For some reason, she clearly remembered his words right now. "No, can you imagine?" Anne returned from her family raid again. "They can't even go to the toilet without me. So I'm running after them, or with them. Believe me, sitting down watching TV, let alone reading, what are you talking about? By the way, did you get your degree?" "Yes, accounting." "Well done, and I never finished anything. First I was pregnant, then I gave birth, sent the kids to kindergarten, and got pregnant again. What education could I get? Even if I wanted to, who would let me study? I don't have a free minute." "Did your husband talk to you?" "No. The mother-in-law herself. We must have jinxed it seems." "Well, daughter-in-law, it's better to answer, report, so to speak. You sit here, I'll be quick." "Yes, Mary Johnson. Hello. Yes, by your prayers." Anne made a face expressively and moved aside. And Sally continued to stir the unfortunate cocktail in the glass with a straw. "Sally, we need to talk." David started this conversation 6 months after their wedding. "What, are you no longer satisfied with your uneducated village wife?" Sally joked. "What does that have to do with it, Sally? I'll be satisfied with you in any form or state. But you need this for yourself, for the future. And for your own confidence, isn't it? You don't really like your current job at the gas station, do you?" "Dave, I finished 3 years of economics. I'd have to re-enroll. I don't remember anything, honestly. And anyway, it's such a hassle, frankly. I'm a bit slow. And studying wasn't very easy for me." She shuddered. "It's no hassle, Sally. You need that diploma." David waved his hand confidently. "Okay, we have 3 months until the semester starts. Plenty of time. I'll prepare you. And about yourself? I think you're exaggerating. You're very smart, much smarter than you think. You just had other things on your mind. You weren't up to studying. So you'll remember everything. And what you don't remember, we'll go over again. It's decided. Tomorrow you go and submit your documents to re-enroll." After David prepared her, Sarah successfully passed the test, returned to the institute, and 2 years later finally received her higher education diploma. "Dave, this is more your diploma than mine," she laughed. "I think he needs it more than I do. Look, you even lost weight from joy, I see." Now, sitting at the cafe table, she suddenly looked at the question completely differently. Yes, it was Dave's diploma. Not in the sense of who needed it more, but in the sense that it came much harder to David than to her. Dave was her tutor for most subjects, fed her while she crammed and threw textbooks at the walls. And most importantly, for 2 whole years he worked tirelessly alone for their family, and for her, the overgrown student. And the joke about Dave losing weight from joy sounded completely different now. He was indeed smiling cheerfully and happily, but there were shadows under his eyes. His face was drawn, and his favorite t-shirt, which had recently fit snugly around his traditional belly, now hung loosely. She suddenly clearly remembered that it was then that he started coming home later than usual. "Dave, what, have you started going out already?" Sarah joked. "Got someone else?" "Yep, I did." He nodded. "Another job, Sally dear. They offered me an interesting project. I need to build a small factory for a local big shot. If it works out, they'll pay me well. We need money now. And for my excellent student to go on vacation, right, Sally? If you don't need me, I'd eat quickly. I still have blueprints to sit with." He sometimes sat with blueprints until morning during that period of their lives. Then he would tell Sally with a guilty look that he didn't have time to make breakfast, kiss her on the forehead, and rush off. After graduating from the institute, she easily got a job at a small commercial firm, fit in well, as they say, and was considered a good, reliable specialist. Sally herself went to work with pleasure, where she not only balanced accounting books and prepared reports, but also genuinely socialized with colleagues, showing off new shoes and suits, or another piece of jewelry David had given her, or showing photos from their latest trip. "Well, mother-in-law?" Anne plopped down onto the chair. "Can you imagine we left our cat with her? Well, to feed him, clean his litter box. So his food is running out. And she, you see, doesn't have enough pension for our troglodyte. Asks where to get money. How should I know? Oh, money. I wish they'd all go to hell. No matter how much you earn, it all goes into some kind of abyss. Oh, where's my wallet?" Anne comically threw up her hands, started patting herself down, as if she could hide something on a tightly stretched sundress. "Oh, where did I put it? Or did I leave it in my bag? Tom! Tommy!" She roared so loudly that a couple of leisurely flying pigeons scattered. "He doesn't hear! What a deaf blockhead! Sally, I'll check now. The wallet has the room key. Money." Money? Interesting. And in these 5 years, she had never been in a situation where she needed to pay, for example, for the apartment or groceries. More precisely, she had never paid for groceries, utilities, or household purchases at all. David always paid for everything himself. And she, Sarah, always had money to buy new boots, or a blouse she liked, or even a coat. And she went to the hairdresser with prices that her friend Lisa called absolutely indecent. And all these years she was the wife of, as she sometimes carelessly put it, just an engineer. True, a highly qualified one, and even, as someone told her in a casual conversation, one who had many job offers. David worked a lot, often on weekends, and she even spent the last 2 vacations without him. "Sally dear, sunshine, you go, and I'll let you go this time. And I need to stay and work. And I'm not tired," he joked. And here was this very trip. She paid for the tickets and the hotel without thinking. Well, yes, it wasn't the peak season, of course, and yet the sum was considerable. She stared at her bank card with surprise, as if seeing it for the first time. The money she earned could not possibly cover the trip. So, someone had transferred a decent amount to the card. Ah, someone? A good wizard? Don't be stupid, Sarah. This is David trying to overwhelm me with nobility. He probably thinks that after this I'll crawl to him on my knees and beg him to forgive me, the village idiot. Well, no way. Having worked herself up, she bit her lip and dialed David's number. "Hello, how's the free man doing? Breathing easy? Already found a worthy replacement for me?" "Hello, Sally. Glad to hear from you," he said calmly and evenly, as always. "Glad? What are you so glad about?" "Well, mind you, David, we still have property to divide. Well, I'll gladly give you your books, and your favorite sofa, too. But we'll sell the rest and split the money. You don't mind, I hope, that half the value of the apartment is mine? Well, at least the part that isn't covered with your stupid wallpaper that I can't stand. If you were a man, you would have re-wallpapered it long ago." "Not half, not a third, Not even an eighth, her conscience whispered. David worked his back off for this apartment all these years, and it belongs... Sally. David's voice sounded tired and muffled. I wasn't going to divide anything with you at all. You don't have to worry about the apartment. If you want, you can stay in it. I'm giving it to you. After all, I can live with my mother, and my grandmother left me a 2-room apartment, so I won't be on the street. You don't say! Well, how lucky everything turned out. She feigned astonishment in her voice, although there was nothing to feign. She was, to put it mildly, in shock anyway. So, he's giving it up? How noble we are. Simply a princely act. Not princely, just manly, David replied. Anyway, Sally, the divorce hearing is set for the 30th. When are you coming back? Don't worry, I'll be there on the 30th. I won't miss the show. She snapped into the receiver. Well then, see you later. Take care, he grumbled. I'll try. For you. She couldn't stop being rude, although she had long felt her face burning with shame. She pressed her hands to her face and wholeheartedly wished the ground would swallow her up. She hated herself for every word she had just said individually, and for all of them taken together. And all that she had thought about in the last couple of days under the influence of burning shame was like a cool shower on a dusty, suffocating city, washing away all the dirt and nastiness. David, kind, smart, noble, modest man. After all, he made her, in the literal sense of the word. And criticizing him is the same as criticizing herself. Bored with him means bored with herself. It's so simple. He gave you his life. Accept this gift and be grateful for it. And if you don't need this gift, just apologize and refuse if you feel you are unworthy. But she doesn't want to refuse anything, because she loves her husband truly, strongly, and sincerely. And she has, and never will have a person dearer than him. David, her husband. Sally, are you overheated? You're so red. Their chairs are something else. I'm afraid to sit down. Anne placed her hand on her long-suffering knee and rocked it in place. My wallet, can you imagine? Oh, Sally, they didn't let us talk properly. Well, how are you doing in general? Anne, finally asking the question she needed an answer to, stared at Sarah. My husband, you know, he's a wonderful person. Kind, smart, patient. And in general, Anne, he's wonderful. And I'm just an idiot. Anne, do you know how to get a ticket for an evening flight? I need to go home urgently, very urgently to my husband. I need to see him immediately. I need to tell him, well, a lot of things. So call him, Anne shrugged. Call him and tell him. No, I can't call. I've already said enough nasty things to him on the phone. I need to see him, look him in the eyes, and have him look me in the eyes. Maybe then he'll believe me. You're a strange one, Sally. Anne shrugged her powerful shoulders again. They'll sell you a ticket, but it'll be 3 times the price, mind you. It's okay. I'll earn it back. The main thing is to see Dave as soon as possible. Okay, Anne. Thank you. Thank you for everything. For your story, and for your life, and for my enlightenment. Sally got up excitedly and unexpectedly hugged her friend. True, she couldn't get her arms around Anne's back. No, you're definitely not normal. I don't understand anything. What are you thanking me for? Anne looked at Sally in bewilderment and hesitantly put her arms around her shoulders. The next day, Sarah opened the door to her and David's apartment. In the hallway stood the person she least wanted to meet right now. She had forgotten that there was another person before whom she would feel agonizingly ashamed of everything she had done and said. Margaret Miller looked at her daughter-in-law in confusion and for some reason smiled, apologetically and sheepishly. You were supposed to come back in a few days. I'm sorry I'm here, but to leave you the apartment documents to sign. He's working, He took on some big order. Although, frankly, I think he just doesn't want to show up here anymore. That's it. And also, she cleared her throat and continued more firmly. David asked me to find a team of repairmen. For some reason, he said, the wallpaper in the hallway needs to be re-wallpapered urgently. I, of course, don't understand anything. And anyway, it's nonsense, separating from your wife and thinking about wallpaper. To be honest, I'm starting to worry about his sanity. Well, so, I found 2 masters. They'll have a bite in your kitchen now and start working. Margaret Miller, dear darling, you don't need to do anything, Sally exclaimed. Don't need what? Her mother-in-law was confused again. You don't need anything. I don't need to take David's things or any documents. And our wallpaper, I beg you, don't touch it. It's the best wallpaper in the world. I absolutely adore it. Okay. Margaret Miller sank onto a chair tiredly. I was afraid my son had gone mad, but it seems there's another lunatic here. Sarah, what's happening? It was happening, Margaret Miller. It was happening. I was a complete fool who almost ruined her life and ruined Dave's life. But now everything is fine. Margaret Miller, dear, I love you very much and I'm grateful to you for everything. And I love Dave very much, and he won't get rid of me that easily. The woman looked at her in astonishment and smiled uncertainly. It was clear that Margaret Miller had not yet completely let go of her suspicions about mass insanity in her son's family. Well, I'll go then. You sort it out yourselves. She stood up and moved towards the door, but, remembering, came back. So, I'm taking the masters? They're not needed? Exactly. After seeing off her mother-in-law and 2 very surprised workers, Sarah grabbed the phone. Dave, hello, she said, freezing and feeling like a girl calling a man she was interested in for the first time. Hello, Sally, he said. Dave, I have to meet you. We'll see each other on the 30th. At the hearing, he replied. No, I won't survive until the 30th. I need to now, immediately. Dave, I'm such an idiot. Just impossible. And I need to explain everything to you, tell you, and ask you. Ask you, Dave, if possible. Don't divorce me. Something rustled, gurgled in the receiver. Dave's voice mumbled something indistinctly. Then there was a sound of a thud, and the connection was cut off. A few seconds later, the phone rang again. Sorry, I dropped the phone. We'll meet, he said. Well, where? At home, of course. At our home. I'll be waiting for you under your wallpaper that you barely managed to save. Come. Half an hour later, David opened the door. Slowly, as if feeling the floor with each step, fearing it might suddenly disappear from under his feet, he entered the apartment. Sally's heart beat joyfully, and then suddenly seemed to stop for a second, and then started beating very fast. And David blushed painfully, fiddling with a bouquet of chrysanthemums in his hands. And for some reason, it was clear that he had blushed with happiness.